John Miller's life wasn't easy. At 35, he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Every day felt like a battle, but John never let it show, at least not in front of his kids. He had promised himself that no matter how hard things got, he would always be their rock. It wasn't just about providing food or shelter. It was about being there for them, teaching them right from wrong, and showing them what it meant to care for others. 3 years ago, his wife Sarah passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind a void so deep that some days John wondered how he managed to keep going. But he did. For Emma, his 8-year-old daughter, and Liam, his 5-year-old son, he found strength he didn't know he had. They were his reason to wake up every morning, even when sleep seemed like a better option. John worked as a mechanic at a small garage tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady enough to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. Most days he spent 10 hours under cars, fixing engines, replacing brakes, and listening to customers complain about repair costs they thought were too high. By the time he clocked out, his hands were covered in grease and his back ached from bending over all day. Still, he smiled because he knew this job was keeping his family afloat. His evenings were reserved for Emma and Liam. After picking them up from after-school care, they'd head home to their tiny 2-bedroom apartment. Dinner was usually something simple: spaghetti, grilled cheese sandwiches, or leftovers reheated in the microwave. On good nights, they played board games or watched cartoons together. On tougher nights, John helped Emma with her homework, while Liam built towers out of blocks on the living room floor. These moments were precious to him, little slices of joy amidst the chaos of life. But life wasn't without its challenges. Money was tight. There were bills to pay, school supplies to buy, and clothes that needed replacing as the kids grew taller each month. Sometimes John skipped meals so the kids could have seconds. Other times he pawned tools from his workshop just to make ends meet. He hated asking for help, though. His pride wouldn't allow it. Instead, he worked harder, taking on extra shifts, whenever possible, even if it meant less time with his children. On this particular evening, John was driving home after another long day at the garage. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the streets into rivers of shimmering reflections. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up, swishing back and forth in a rhythmic dance. John sighed deeply, gripping the steering wheel tightly. All he wanted was to get home, hug his kids, and collapse onto the couch for a few minutes before starting dinner. As he rounded a bend in the road, something caught his eye: a sleek black car parked awkwardly on the shoulder. Its hazard lights blinked urgently through the rain. Curious, John slowed down and pulled over behind it. Stepping out of his truck, he grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and walked toward the vehicle. That's when he saw her. Woman stood beside the car, drenched despite holding an umbrella. Her designer coat clung to her frame, and her perfectly styled hair was now plastered against her forehead. She looked miserable, staring down at one of the tires, which was completely flat. John approached cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me," he called out over the sound of the rain. "Do you need any help?" The woman turned to face him, relief washing over her features. "Oh, thank goodness," she exclaimed. "I don't know anything about cars. I've been stuck here for almost an hour waiting for roadside assistance." John nodded sympathetically. He'd seen situations like this before. People broke down all the time, especially during bad weather. "Don't worry," he said reassuringly. "I can take a look. I'm a mechanic." Without waiting for a response, he knelt beside the tire and inspected it. Sure enough, it was beyond repair. A nail had punctured it cleanly. Changing it wouldn't be difficult, but it would require getting wet and dirty. John hesitated for a moment, thinking about how tired he already was. Then he glanced at the woman again. She looked genuinely distressed, shivering slightly in the cold rain. How could he leave her stranded? So he rolled up his sleeves and got to work. As he loosened the lug nuts and jacked up the car, he tried to make conversation to lighten the mood. "Bad night for a flat tire, huh?" he joked. She chuckled weakly. "You're telling me. I should have stayed home tonight. This is my first time driving this route, actually. Guess I picked the wrong day to explore." John nodded absently, focusing on the task at hand. Well, you're lucky I happened to drive by. Not many people stop these days. I can tell, she replied gratefully. Thank you so much for helping me. I really appreciate it. No problem, John said simply. It's what anyone would do. They continued talking as he worked, exchanging bits and pieces of their lives. She told him her name was Evelyn Carter, and that she lived downtown. He mentioned his kids and his job at the garage. Their worlds couldn't have been more different, yet there was a warmth in their conversation that made the rain seem less dreary. By the time John finished changing the tire, the rain had eased into a drizzle. He wiped his hands on a rag and stood up, brushing off his jeans. All set, he announced. Just be careful driving on this one until you can get it replaced. Evelyn smiled gratefully, reaching into her purse. Let me pay you for your trouble. John shook his head firmly. No need. Like I said, it's what anyone would do, she insisted, but he refused politely, climbing back into his truck before she could argue further. As he drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw her waving goodbye. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel good about what he'd done. Helping someone in need felt nice. It reminded him that even in tough times, kindness mattered. Little did John know, this seemingly ordinary act of generosity was about to change his life forever. The rain had finally stopped, and the air smelled fresh, almost cleansing, as Evelyn Carter stood by her car, watching John's truck disappear into the distance. She felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that her problem was solved, gratitude for the stranger who had helped her, and a lingering sense of curiosity about the man himself. There was something about him that stayed with her long after he'd driven away. It wasn't just his kindness or his willingness to stop on a rainy night when most people would have kept going. It was the way he carried himself, the quiet confidence, the calm demeanor, and the genuine warmth in his voice. Evelyn climbed back into her car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. As she started driving, her mind wandered. She thought about the brief conversation they'd shared while he worked on her tire. He had mentioned being a mechanic, raising 2 kids on his own, and working long hours to make ends meet. His words were simple, but they painted a picture of someone who had faced more than his fair share of struggles yet still found room in his heart to help others. That kind of selflessness was rare these days, especially in a world where everyone seemed so focused on their own lives. For Evelyn, this encounter felt like a wake-up call. Her life couldn't have been more different from John's. At 42, she was a successful entrepreneur, the founder of a tech company that had made her a millionaire several times over. She lived in a luxurious penthouse downtown, drove expensive cars, and traveled the world whenever she wanted. On paper, she had everything anyone could ever dream of: wealth, power, independence. But deep down, there was a part of her that often felt empty, disconnected from the real world. Outside her gilded bubble, helping others wasn't something she did regularly. Her days were filled with meetings, deadlines, and networking events, leaving little time for anything else. As she navigated the wet streets toward her apartment, Evelyn replayed the scene. In her head, the soaked mechanic kneeling in the mud, his hands dirty but steady as he worked tirelessly to fix her flat tire. She remembered how he refused her offer of payment, saying it was what anyone would do. But Evelyn knew better. Not everyone would have stopped. In fact, most people wouldn't have even noticed her plight, let alone gone out of their way to help. And here was this man, tired and drenched, choosing to assist a complete stranger without expecting anything in return. By the time she reached her building, Evelyn's thoughts were racing. She parked her car in the underground garage and took the elevator up to her penthouse. Stepping inside, she was greeted by the familiar sight of floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Normally, this view brought her peace, a reminder of how far she'd come since her humble beginnings. Tonight, however, it felt hollow. The glittering lights of the city seemed distant, almost mocking, compared to the raw humanity she'd witnessed earlier. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat down on the couch, staring out at the horizon. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to reflect on her life, Not just the successes, but also the sacrifices she'd made along the way. Building her company had consumed her, leaving little room for personal relationships or meaningful connections. Sure, she had friends and colleagues, but none of them truly understood what it meant to struggle. They lived in the same privileged world she did, insulated from the hardships faced by those less fortunate. And then there was John, a single father working long hours at a small garage, raising 2 young children on his own, and somehow managing to remain kind and compassionate despite the weight of his responsibilities. Evelyn couldn't shake the image of him standing in the rain, refusing her money with a smile. It reminded her of a simpler time in her own life, before success and ambition overshadowed everything else. Back then, she too had believed in the goodness of people, in the importance of helping others without expecting rewards. Somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of that belief. Determined not to forget this moment, Evelyn grabbed a pen and notebook from the coffee table. She began jotting down notes about her encounter with John, his name, the garage where he worked, and the details of their brief conversation. She didn't know why she felt compelled to write it all down, but something told her this meeting wasn't random. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was simply a reminder that no matter how successful you become, you should never lose touch with your humanity. Over the next few days, Evelyn found herself thinking about John constantly. She wondered what his life was like outside of that rainy night. What did his kids look like? How did he manage to stay so positive despite the challenges he faced? Did he ever feel overwhelmed by the weight of his responsibilities? These questions gnawed at her, urging her to take action. But what could she do? She barely knew the man. Offering him money outright might come across as intrusive or even offensive, yet she couldn't ignore the urge to repay his kindness in some way. One afternoon, while sitting in her office overlooking the bustling city below, Evelyn had an idea. She picked up her phone and dialed the number of a private investigator she occasionally hired for business matters. "I need you to find someone for me," she said firmly. "His name is John Miller. He works at a garage. I think it's called Reliable Auto Repair. Get me whatever information you can." The investigator promised to deliver the results within a day, and true to his word, he sent Evelyn a detailed report the following evening. It included John's address, his work schedule, and even a bit of background information about his family. Reading through it, Evelyn felt a pang of guilt. Was it wrong to pry into his life like this? She justified her actions by telling herself that she only wanted to help, that her intentions were pure. Still, she knew she had to tread carefully. Deciding against reaching out directly, Evelyn came up with a plan. The next morning, she dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, deliberately avoiding anything that screamed rich or successful. Then she drove to Reliable Auto Repair, parking her luxury car a block away so as not to draw attention. Walking into the garage, she spotted John immediately. He was bent over the hood of a car, his hands covered in grease, completely absorbed in his work. "Hi," she said softly, approaching him hesitantly. John looked up, surprised to see her. "Oh, hey, you're Evelyn, right?" She nodded, smiling. "That's me. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "No, not at all," he replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "What brings you here?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment, then decided to stick to her cover story. "Actually, I've been meaning to get my car checked. It's been making this weird noise lately, and I figured I'd bring it in before it turns into a bigger issue." John raised an eyebrow. "Weird noise, huh? Well, we can definitely take a look. When did it start?" "Just recently," she lied smoothly. "Maybe last week, I'm not sure. It's hard to tell with these things." He nodded understandingly. "Okay, let's have a look. Bring it around and we'll see what's going on." As Evelyn followed him outside to retrieve her car, she couldn't help but marvel at how effortlessly he slipped into professional mode. Despite knowing who she was and why she was really there, he treated her like any other customer, polite, attentive, and thorough. Watching him inspect her vehicle, she realized just how skilled he was. Every movement was precise, every observation thoughtful. It was clear that he took pride in his work, even if it didn't pay much. After finishing his diagnosis, which turned out to be nothing serious, John handed her the clipboard to sign off on the service. "Looks like your car's in good shape," he said with a grin. "No major issues to worry about." Evelyn smiled back, handing him the clipboard. "Thanks. Again, John, I really appreciate it." "It's no problem," he replied, shrugging modestly. "Glad I could help." As she prepared to leave, Evelyn paused, turning back to face him. "Listen, I've been wanting to thank you properly for helping me the other night. Are you free sometime? Maybe we could grab lunch or coffee?" John looked taken aback by the offer. Sure, I guess, but you don't have to." "I want to," Evelyn interrupted gently. "Consider it a token of gratitude. No strings attached." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, thanks, I'd like that." With that, Evelyn climbed back into her car and drove away, feeling a flicker of excitement. This was just the beginning. Whatever happened next, she was determined to make sure John's act of kindness didn't go unnoticed. Little did either of them know, their paths were about to cross in ways neither could have anticipated. Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about John. After their brief meeting at the garage, she found herself replaying every detail of their interaction. The way he spoke so humbly, the sincerity in his eyes, and the quiet pride he took in his work. She had seen glimpses of a life far removed from her own, one filled with grit, determination, and sacrifice. It fascinated her, not because it was foreign or exotic, but because it reminded her of something essential that she felt she'd lost. Along the way, connection. The truth was, Evelyn's wealth hadn't brought her the fulfillment she once thought it would. Sure, it gave her comfort, security, and freedom, but it also created a barrier between her and the rest of the world. People treated her differently now, deferential, cautious, sometimes even envious. Few dared to speak to her as an equal, and fewer still saw beyond the polished exterior to the person beneath. But John? He hadn't hesitated to treat her like anyone else. To him, she was just another driver stranded on the side of the road, someone who needed help. That simple act of seeing her as human moved her more than she cared to admit. Over the next few days, Evelyn wrestled with what to do next. She knew she wanted to repay John for his kindness. But how? Money seemed too impersonal, almost dismissive, of the depth of gratitude she felt. Besides, she suspected he wouldn't accept charity easily. Not someone like him, who carried himself with such dignity despite his circumstances. No, whatever she did had to be thoughtful, meaningful, and respectful of his pride. Her mind kept returning to their conversation at the garage. He had mentioned his kids, Emma and Liam, and how much they meant to him. The love in his voice when he talked about them was unmistakable. Evelyn imagined what it must be like for him, raising 2 young children alone while juggling long hours at work. How did he manage? How did he keep going when life threw obstacles at him day after day? She admired his resilience, his ability to find joy in the little things, and his unwavering commitment to doing right by his family. One evening, as Evelyn sat on her balcony sipping tea, she decided to take action. She opened her laptop and began researching local resources for single parents, programs that offered financial assistance, childcare support, or educational opportunities. What she discovered surprised her. While there were some organizations dedicated to helping struggling families, many of them were underfunded and understaffed, leaving countless people without access to the help they desperately needed. It struck Evelyn that John's situation wasn't unique. There were likely thousands of others like him, quietly carrying the weight of their responsibilities without asking for recognition or aid. An idea began to form in her mind, an idea that excited her in a way nothing had in years. What if she could use her resources to make a difference? Not just for John, but for others like him. She envisioned creating a foundation that provided practical support to single parents, offering everything from scholarships for their children to grants for starting small businesses. It would be her way of giving back, of honoring the lesson John had unknowingly taught her, that true wealth lies not in what you accumulate, but in what you give. But before diving into grand plans, Evelyn knew she needed to focus on John first. This wasn't just about philanthropy. It was personal. She owed him more than a generic gesture. She owed him something tailored specifically to his needs. So she devised a plan. The following week, she arranged to meet him for lunch at a cozy cafe near his workplace. When she arrived, she spotted him sitting at a corner table, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she approached, smiling warmly. "Hey, Evelyn," he said, standing up to greet her. "Thanks for coming." "No, thank you," she replied, taking a seat across from him. "For agreeing to meet me, I mean." They ordered sandwiches and coffee, chatting casually about their respective weeks. Evelyn steered the conversation toward his life, asking questions about his kids, his job, and his dreams for the future. John answered honestly, sharing stories about Emma's recent school project and Liam's obsession with dinosaurs. He laughed as he described their antics, his face lighting up with pride. Evelyn listened intently, marveling at the balance he struck between humor and tenderness. At one point, she asked, "Do you ever feel overwhelmed? Like, how do you manage everything on your own?" John paused, considering the question. "Yeah, sometimes it feels like too much," he admitted. "But I remind myself why I'm doing it, for my kids. They're my reason to keep pushing forward. And honestly, I've learned to take things one day at a time. Some days are harder than others, but I try to focus on the good stuff." Evelyn nodded, touched by his perspective. "That's incredible, John. You're doing an amazing job." He shrugged modestly. "I'm just trying my best. That's all any of us can do, right?" Their conversation flowed naturally, shifting from light-hearted topics to deeper reflections. Evelyn shared bits of her own story, explaining how she built her company from scratch and the challenges she faced along the way. She left out the details about her wealth, focusing instead on the universal struggles of entrepreneurship, long hours, self-doubt, and the constant pressure to succeed. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely connected to someone, unburdened by pretense or expectation. As their meal drew to a close, Evelyn broached the subject she'd been mulling over. "Listen, John," she began carefully. "I've been thinking about how I can thank you properly for helping me the other night. I know you turned down my offer back then, but I really want to do something." John raised his hand, shaking his head. "Evelyn, please, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she interrupted gently. "But I want to. And I promise this isn't charity. Well, let me explain." She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table toward him. "Before you say anything, hear me out. Inside is a check. It's not a huge amount, but it's enough to ease some of your burdens, to pay off debts, move into a safer neighborhood, maybe even save for something special for your kids. Think of it as a gift, no strings attached." John stared at the envelope, stunned. His initial instinct was to refuse. Taking money from someone he barely knew felt wrong, but Evelyn's earnest expression stopped him. She wasn't being condescending or pitying. She genuinely wanted to help. "I don't know what to say," he murmured finally. "You don't have to say anything," Evelyn replied softly. "Just promise me you'll use it wisely for your family." John nodded slowly, still processing the magnitude of her gesture. "Thank you, Evelyn. Really, I don't know how to repay you." "You already have," she said firmly. "By reminding me of the power of kindness. Now let me return the favor." They parted ways shortly afterward, each carrying a renewed sense of purpose. For John, the envelope represented hope, a chance to provide his kids with a better life, to break free from the cycle of barely scraping by. For Evelyn, it marked the beginning of a journey she hadn't anticipated, but was eager to embrace. As she drove home that evening, she felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. That night, Evelyn sat down at her desk and began drafting a proposal for her foundation. She titled it Second Chances, inspired by the belief that everyone deserves an opportunity to thrive, regardless of their circumstances. Her encounter with John had shown her that compassion could change lives, not just for the recipient, but for the giver as well. And though she didn't yet know where this path would lead, One thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. John couldn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on his kitchen table unopened, taunting him with its possibilities. He stared at it for what felt like hours, wrestling with conflicting emotions, gratitude, guilt, and a gnawing sense of uncertainty. On one hand, he knew Evelyn's intentions were pure. She wasn't trying to belittle him or make him feel indebted. But accepting such a generous gift felt complicated. Wasn't there something inherently wrong about taking money from someone you barely knew? Would it change the way he saw himself? Or worse, the way others saw him? His thoughts drifted to Emma and Liam, asleep in the next room. They were the reason he worked so hard, the reason he pushed through exhaustion and stress every single day. If this check could give them a better life, if it could mean fewer worries and more opportunities, how could he justify turning it down? Yet, pride whispered in the back of his mind. Pride that had kept him going all these years, even when things seemed impossible. Pride that told him he should be able to provide for his family without outside help. Finally, after pacing the small apartment for what felt like an eternity, John sat down at the table and opened the envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the check. The amount written on it made his breath catch in his throat. $50,000. It was more than he earned in 2 years at the garage. For a moment, he simply stared at the numbers, his mind struggling to process what they meant. This wasn't just a lifeline, it was a game changer. The first thing he thought of was rent. Their current apartment was cramped and drafty, with thin walls that let in every noise from the neighbors. Moving somewhere safer and more spacious would make a world of difference for the kids. Then there were the bills piling up. Credit card, debt, medical expenses, car repairs. Paying those off would ease the constant financial pressure weighing him down. And maybe, just maybe, he could start saving for something bigger. Something like opening his own auto repair shop. A dream he'd tucked away years ago because it seemed too far out of reach. But even as these practical plans formed in his mind, John felt uneasy. He didn't want to take advantage of Evelyn's generosity. What if she expected something in return? What if people found out and judged him for accepting such a large sum? These doubts plagued him until morning, when he decided to call his older sister, Rachel. She was the only person he trusted completely, the one who always gave honest advice, even when he didn't want to hear it. "Rachel, I need your opinion," he said when she picked up the phone. "Something happened and I don't know what to do." He explained everything. The flat tire, the lunch meeting, the envelope on his kitchen table. When he finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Rachel spoke, her tone firm but kind. "John, sometimes you have to let people help you. You've spent the last 3 years doing everything on your own, carrying the weight of the world. There's no shame in accepting support when it's offered freely." "But it's so much money," John protested. "What if I mess it up? What if—" "You won't," Rachel interrupted. "You're not the type of person to waste something like this. Use it wisely, for the kids, for yourself, for your future, and stop overthinking it. This is a gift, not a burden." Her words struck a chord deep within him. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to stop seeing help as a weakness and start viewing it as an opportunity. After hanging up with Rachel, John spent the rest of the day making lists, writing down every expense, every goal, every dream he'd shelved because it seemed impractical. By the evening, he had a clear plan. He would use part of the money to pay off debts, another portion to move into a better neighborhood, and the remainder to build a savings fund. Anything left over would go toward researching how to open his own business someday. Meanwhile, Evelyn was grappling with her own whirlwind of emotions. Since meeting John, she couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter was meant to happen. It wasn't just about gratitude anymore. It was about purpose. For years, she had poured her energy into building her company, chasing success and accumulating wealth. But now she realized she had been running on autopilot, disconnected from the very values that once drove her. Helping John reignited something inside her, a desire to create meaningful change, not just for herself, but for others. Inspired by her conversation with him, Evelyn threw herself into developing her foundation. second chances. She envisioned it as a resource hub for single parents, offering everything from childcare grants to scholarships for their children. But she wanted it to be more than just financial aid. She imagined workshops, mentorship programs, and community-building events that would empower families to break free from cycles of poverty and hardship. To bring her vision to life, Evelyn assembled a team of experts, social workers, educators, and nonprofit leaders who shared her passion for helping underserved communities. Together, they brainstormed ideas, identified gaps in existing services, and crafted a mission statement that reflected their collective goals. The process was exhilarating, filling Evelyn with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As the weeks went by, Evelyn found herself thinking about John often. She wondered how he was adjusting to the changes in his life and whether the check had made the impact she hoped it would. Part of her wanted to reach out to ask how he was doing, but she hesitated. She didn't want to intrude or make him feel obligated to stay in touch. Instead, she channeled her curiosity into her work, using his story as a source of inspiration. One afternoon, while reviewing grant applications for the foundation, Evelyn stumbled upon a familiar name, Reliable Auto Repair. Curious, she clicked on the file and discovered that John had submitted a proposal requesting funding to expand his workshop and hire additional staff. Her heart swelled with pride. He wasn't content to merely improve his own situation. He was looking for ways to grow professionally and contribute to his community. It was exactly the kind of initiative she admired. Evelyn immediately approved the application, adding a note encouraging John to apply for future grants as his business developed. She also included a personal message. "John, I'm thrilled to see you pursuing your dreams. Your dedication and resilience are truly inspiring. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you ever need guidance or support. You're doing incredible work." When John received the email notifying him of the grant approval, he was overwhelmed with emotion. Not only had Evelyn given him a second chance personally, but she was now investing in his professional aspirations as well. It was more than he could have asked for, and it reinforced his belief that kindness has a ripple effect, touching lives, in ways both big and small. Over the next few months, John's life began to transform. With his debts paid off and a new apartment secured, he finally felt a sense of stability he hadn't experienced in years. Emma and Liam thrived in their new environment, making friends at school and exploring hobbies they'd never had the chance to try before. As for John, he threw himself into planning for his future business venture, attending workshops and networking with other entrepreneurs. Each step forward filled him with hope and determination. At the same time, Evelyn's foundation gained momentum, earning praise from local media and attracting donors eager to support its mission. Through her work, she connected with countless individuals whose stories mirrored John's, people who faced adversity with courage and grace. Every interaction reminded her of why she started this journey in the first place. Though their paths continued to intersect indirectly, both John and Evelyn carried the lessons they'd learned from each other into their respective futures. For John, it was the realization that accepting help doesn't diminish strength, it amplifies it. For Evelyn, it was the understanding that true fulfillment comes not from personal achievement, but from lifting others up. Together, albeit unknowingly, they were proof that even the smallest acts of kindness can spark profound change. Months had passed since John received the grant from Evelyn's foundation, and his life was beginning to take shape in ways he never imagined. The new apartment was brighter, quieter, and safer, a place where Emma and Liam could truly feel at home. For the first time in years, John didn't wake up dreading the pile of bills on the kitchen counter or the looming threat of eviction. Those worries were behind him now, replaced by a sense of stability that allowed him to focus on bigger dreams. One of those dreams was opening his own auto repair shop. With the help of Evelyn's foundation, he began taking steps toward making it a reality. He enrolled in online business courses learning about budgeting, marketing, and customer service. On weekends, he visited other local garages, observing how they operated and chatting with owners about their experiences. Slowly but surely, he pieced together a plan for what he wanted his shop to look like. Not just a place to fix cars, but a community hub where people felt valued and respected. John also started saving diligently. Every paycheck went into two separate accounts, one for daily expenses and another earmarked specifically for his business venture. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when doubt crept in, whispering that maybe this was too ambitious, too risky. But then he'd think about Evelyn's faith in him, her willingness to invest not only in his present but also in his future. That thought alone kept him going, pushing through late nights and early mornings with renewed determination. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued pouring her energy into second chances. The foundation had grown rapidly, thanks in part to the media attention it garnered after launching its inaugural programs. Local newspapers wrote glowing articles about Evelyn's vision, highlighting stories of families whose lives had been transformed by the foundation's support. Donations poured in from businesses and individuals eager to contribute, allowing Evelyn to expand the scope of her initiatives. Tutoring centers for children, job training workshops for parents, and affordable housing partnerships became staples of the foundation's offerings. Despite her busy schedule, Evelyn often found herself reflecting on John. She wondered how his plans were progressing, whether the grant had made the impact she hoped it would. Occasionally, she considered reaching out directly, but something held her back. Their relationship had always been built on mutual respect and subtle gestures. She didn't want to overstep or disrupt the delicate balance they'd established. Still, the curiosity lingered, gnawing at the edges of her mind. Then one day an email landed in her inbox that caught her completely off guard. It was from John, subject line reading simply, "Thank you." Her heart skipped a beat as she clicked it open. "Dear Evelyn, I hope this message finds you well. I've been meaning to write to you for some time now, but I kept putting it off because I wasn't sure how to put my gratitude into words. Honestly, I'm still not sure I can do it justice, but here goes. When we first met, I had no idea our paths would cross again, or that your kindness would change my life so profoundly. The check you gave me didn't just ease my financial burdens, it gave me hope. Hope that things could get better, that I could provide a brighter future for my kids, and that I might finally pursue a dream I'd long given up on. Thanks to your generosity and the incredible support of your foundation, I've taken significant steps toward opening my own auto repair shop. I've learned so much about running a business, and I'm currently scouting locations for the space. It's scary, of course, but also exhilarating. For the first time in years, I feel like I have control over my destiny. But more than anything, I want you to know how much your belief in me has meant. You saw potential in someone who didn't even see it in himself. That kind of encouragement is rare, and it's something I'll carry with me forever. Please let me know if there's ever a way I can repay your kindness. Or better yet, join you in helping others. Your foundation is doing amazing work, and I'd love to contribute however I can. Thank you again, Evelyn. From the bottom of my heart. Sincerely, John. Evelyn read the email 3 times before setting her phone down, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't expected such raw honesty, such heartfelt appreciation. Reading John's words reminded her why she started this journey in the first place, to make a difference no matter how small. And here was proof that her efforts were working. She immediately replied, inviting John to meet for dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown. This time there was no pretense, no cover story. She simply wanted to reconnect, to hear more about his progress and share updates about the foundation. When John accepted her invitation, Evelyn felt a surge of excitement. Their meeting wasn't just about catching up. It was about celebrating how far they'd both come since that rainy night on the side of the road. The evening of their dinner arrived, and Evelyn walked into the restaurant feeling unusually nervous. She spotted John sitting at a corner table, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt. He stood up as she approached, smiling warmly. "Evelyn," he said, extending his hand. "Thanks for meeting me." "It's my pleasure," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. "You look great." They sat down and ordered drinks, easing into conversation as if no time had passed since their last meeting. John updated her on his business plans, sharing sketches of the shop's layout and ideas for services he wanted to offer. Evelyn listened intently, offering suggestions, and asking thoughtful questions. In turn, she told him about the foundation's growth, describing the challenges and triumphs she'd experienced along the way. At one point, John leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Evelyn, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done, for me, for my family, for so many others. But I don't want to just sit back and watch anymore. I want to be part of the solution. How can I help?" Evelyn smiled, touched by his eagerness. "Actually, I was hoping you'd say that. We're looking for mentors, people who can guide others through similar journeys. Someone like you, who understands what it's like to struggle and overcome, would be invaluable." John nodded enthusiastically. "Count me in. Whatever you need, I'm here." As the evening wore on, their conversation shifted from practical matters to personal reflections. They talked about their fears, their hopes, and the lessons they'd learned from each other. Evelyn confessed that meeting John had reignited her passion for giving back, while John admitted that her belief in him had restored his confidence. By the end of the night, they weren't just benefactor and beneficiary. They were partners, united by a shared commitment to making the world a better place. In the weeks that followed, John threw himself into mentoring other single parents. Through the foundation, he hosted workshops on financial planning, shared his experiences of balancing work and family, and offered advice on pursuing entrepreneurial dreams. His authenticity resonated with participants, inspiring them to believe in their own potential. For Evelyn, seeing John step into this role was deeply fulfilling. It reinforced her belief that everyone has the capacity to create positive change, if only they're given the tools and opportunities to do so. Together, they expanded the foundation's reach, tackling new challenges and exploring innovative solutions. Though their lives remained distinct in many ways, John and Evelyn had formed a bond that transcended circumstances. They were living proof that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can spark extraordinary transformations, not just in individual lives but in entire communities. And as they looked toward the future, they knew their journey was far from over. Months turned into a year, and the partnership between John and Evelyn continued to flourish. What had started as a simple act of kindness on a rainy night had blossomed into something neither of them could have predicted, a powerful collaboration that touched countless lives. Their shared mission to uplift struggling families became a beacon of hope in their community, proving that compassion and determination could create lasting change. John's dream of opening his own auto repair shop finally came true 6 months after their dinner meeting. With the knowledge he'd gained from business courses, the financial backing from Evelyn's foundation, and his unwavering work ethic, he transformed an old warehouse on the outskirts of town into Miller's Mechanics. The shop was modest, but welcoming, with clean floors, bright lighting, and a mural painted by local artists depicting cars racing through scenic landscapes. Above the entrance hung a sign that read, "Where your vehicle meets care, for you and your community." From day one, John made it clear that Miller's Mechanics wasn't just about fixing cars. It was about building trust. He hired a team of mechanics who shared his values, offering fair prices and honest advice to customers. But what truly set the shop apart was its outreach program. Every Saturday morning, John hosted free car maintenance workshops for single parents, teaching them basic skills like changing oil, replacing tires, and diagnosing common issues. These sessions weren't just practical, they were empowering, giving participants the confidence to handle minor repairs themselves and save money in the process. Word spread quickly about John's unique approach, and soon, Miller's Mechanics became a cornerstone of the neighborhood. Parents brought their kids along to the workshops, turning them into family events. Some even volunteered to help organize activities or bake snacks for attendees. It was exactly the kind of community hub John had envisioned, a place where people felt supported and valued. Evelyn watched all of this unfold with pride. She attended the grand opening of Miller's Mechanics, cutting the ribbon alongside John while Emma and Liam cheered excitedly in the background. Seeing John standing tall behind the counter, greeting customers with a warm smile, filled her with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known she needed. This wasn't just success, it was purpose. Inspired by John's progress, Evelyn doubled down on her efforts with second chances. The foundation now operated several programs across the city, each tailored to meet the specific needs of different communities. There were after-school tutoring centers for children, job training workshops for adults, and affordable housing initiatives designed to provide safe, stable environments for families. Evelyn also launched a microloan program to support aspiring entrepreneurs like John, helping them turn their ideas into sustainable businesses. But perhaps the most impactful initiative was the Mentorship Network. John played a central role in its development, recruiting other mentors from diverse backgrounds to guide participants through their personal and professional journeys. They met regularly at community centers, coffee shops, or even John's garage, sharing stories, offering advice, and celebrating milestones together. For many, these relationships became lifelines, providing not only guidance but also friendship and encouragement during tough times. As the foundation grew, so did Evelyn's reputation as a champion for underserved communities. She gave speeches, at conferences, appeared on television shows, and wrote op-eds advocating for systemic changes to address poverty and inequality. Yet, despite her newfound fame, she remained grounded, always crediting John and others like him for inspiring her work. To her, they were the real heroes, the ones doing the hard, often thankless work of rebuilding their lives while still finding ways to give back. One crisp autumn afternoon, Evelyn received an invitation that took her breath away. It was from a prestigious nonprofit organization, nominating her for a humanitarian award recognizing individuals who had made significant contributions to society. Attached to the nomination letter was a note from the selection committee, highlighting her innovative approach to philanthropy and the tangible impact of her foundation. Evelyn stared at the document for a long time, unsure how to feel. On one hand, she was honored. On the other, she couldn't shake the thought that this recognition belonged to everyone involved in second chances, not just her. When she told John about the nomination over lunch, he grinned mischievously. "You deserve it, Evelyn." No arguments. "I don't know," she replied, shaking her head. "This isn't about me. It's about the people we're helping, the families, the kids, the mentors. Without them, none of this would be possible." "That may be true," John said, leaning forward earnestly. "But someone had to start it all. Someone had to believe in us when we didn't believe in ourselves. That person is you." His words struck a chord deep within her. Maybe he was right. Maybe accepting the award wasn't about claiming credit. It was about shining a light on the importance of collective effort, of coming together to lift each other up. With renewed resolve, Evelyn accepted the nomination and began preparing for the ceremony. The night of the awards gala arrived, and Evelyn stood nervously backstage as the host introduced her. When she stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. Dressed in a simple yet elegant gown, she smiled graciously, scanning the crowd until her eyes landed on John, Rachel, Emma, and Liam sitting near the front row. Their presence calmed her nerves, reminding her why she was there. In her acceptance speech, Evelyn spoke passionately about the power of kindness and the ripple effects it creates. She shared John's story, describing how his selflessness on a rainy night inspired her to rethink her priorities and dedicate herself to helping others. She emphasized that true change begins with ordinary people making extraordinary choices rooted in empathy, generosity, and courage. By the time she finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the ceremony, John approached her with a proud grin. "That was incredible, Evelyn. You nailed it." "Thanks," she said, hugging him tightly. "But I couldn't have done it without you. None of this would exist without your example." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by friends, family, and supporters, basking in the glow of what they'd accomplished together. It wasn't just about awards or accolades, it was about the lives they'd touched, the futures they'd shaped, and the bond they'd forged along the way. Years later, when asked about the defining moments of their lives, both John and Evelyn pointed to that fateful rainy night. For John, it was the beginning of a journey toward stability, purpose, and fulfillment. For Evelyn, it was a reminder of the humanity she'd nearly forgotten in her pursuit of success. Together, they proved that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can spark extraordinary transformations, not just in individual lives, but in entire communities. And as they looked toward the future, they knew their work was far from over. After all, every ending is simply the start of a new chapter.